I found the ad at 3:12 a.m., hidden 5 pages away in a forum thread titled, "No Questions Asked Employment." The headline was austere, almost lazy, just 3 words in capital letters: remote. Highly paying. Urgent. $250,000 for a month of on-site work. All expenses paid. No work experience required. Tolerance for isolation is preferred. This phrase should have put me off, but when your bank account is screaming and your landlord is threatening to chain the door, intuition becomes a luxury. I applied. 20 minutes later, I received a call. The voice on the other end of the line was not robotic. It was worse. He was calm, too calm, as if someone was reading a eulogy he hadn't written. "We're glad you accepted the offer," he said before I could even speak. "Please do not discuss this call. Further instructions are in your inbox." 2 hours later, I was in a downtown office building I'd never noticed before, escorted through an unmarked door by a man who didn't blink once. There was no logo, no receptionist, just beige carpet and white noise humming from vents in the walls. The interview was barely an interview. A woman in a gray suit, also never blinking, handed me a stack of forms thicker than a phone book, and every page was stamped confidential. There were no job details, no title, no duties listed. Just a single sentence at the top: "You agree to total compliance." I hesitated, asked what I'd be doing, but the woman just repeated, "You'll be well compensated," and slid a pen across the table. I don't know why I signed it. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the desperation. Maybe it was the way the air in that room seemed thinner, like I was already somewhere else. Before I could think about it too long, I was handed a sealed black envelope, told to pack light, and driven to a private dock at the edge of the city where a white seaplane waited, its windows tinted completely black. The pilot didn't say a word the entire flight. We flew for what felt like hours over endless water, no land in sight, no announcements, no radio chatter. My phone had no signal 5 minutes after takeoff. I tried to sleep, but the silence was so loud it gnawed at my ears. Just as I was starting to regret everything, the clouds broke, and there it was. An island so lush, so green, it looked unreal, like a render from a video game. There were no signs of buildings, no docks, no airstrip, just trees, cliffs, and black stone breaking through the waves like bones. As we descended, I realized my GPS had stopped updating 20 minutes ago. I leaned forward, trying to spot something, anything familiar. "What is this place?" I finally asked the pilot, my voice shaky. "What's the island called?" He didn't turn around. He didn't speak. He just smiled. The moment my boots hit the soft, white sand, I realized something was wrong. Not in the dramatic, horror movie sense, but in a way that crept up behind your ribs and slowly wrapped itself around your lungs. The island was too perfect. The beach looked like it had been vacuum sealed. Not a single footprint. Not even mine lingered for more than a few seconds before the wind erased them like a chalkboard swipe. Palm trees curved at mathematically impossible angles, their leaves swaying gently even when the air was completely still. The sky above was a pristine blue that never seemed to shift, like someone had painted it and pressed pause on time. The pilot pointed toward the treeline, where a narrow path of polished black stones led into the jungle. "Follow the path," he said with that same eerie smile. "They're expecting you." I turned to ask who, but he was already climbing back into the cockpit. The engine roared to life, and before I could say another word, the plane was airborne, leaving me alone with the shrieking sound of cicadas and the whisper of something deeper, just beneath the trees. The walk to base camp felt longer than it should have. Every few minutes I thought I saw something in the brush, movement, flickers of white or silver, but when I stopped, it was gone. Eventually, the foliage thinned out and revealed what they called the research hub, though it looked more like a military outpost than anything academic. A 10-foot electrified fence circled a complex of 5 metal buildings, each humming with the sound of generators and lit with floodlights even though it was midday. Armed guards, not scientists, stood at the only gate, their eyes blank, their guns very real. Inside, I met the others, 10 people, all wearing the same gray jumpsuit I'd been issued, all just as confused. There was Laura, a geneticist who had signed up thinking this was a biotech grant. Darius, a geologist who was told it was a volcanic study. Even a novelist named Ken who claimed he was offered a writer-in-residence fellowship. Different stories, same job, Observe, report, obey. None of us were told what exactly we were researching. All we had were notebooks and vague instructions: catalog abnormalities, maintain protocol, report all dreams. Phones were confiscated. Satellite internet had been cut for security. We were told we'd get one chance to leave after 30 days. No earlier. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not just from the heat, which was thick and wet like a fever you couldn't sweat out, but because something didn't feel right. The base was too quiet, too still, like the island was holding its breath and waiting for us to do something wrong. I lay awake in my cot, listening to the low hum of the generators and the occasional shuffle of footsteps outside. Then, at 2:43 a.m., I heard it. A scream as sharp, human, and absolutely real. It echoed through the metal walls and sliced into the night like a blade. I sat up, heart pounding, waiting for the alarm, the chaos, anything. But nothing came. No one moved. No one else in the dorm even stirred. I stood up, walked to Laura's bunk and whispered, "Did you hear that?" She rolled over, her eyes glazed. "Hear what?" she mumbled, and went back to sleep. The next morning, I checked the perimeter. No logs of movement, no reports filed. But as I passed the edge of the jungle, I saw it, a single footprint in the dirt, facing the trees. Bare, small, fresh, and already fading. We were told the jungle expeditions were a critical part of observation. What they didn't tell us was why each group was flanked by 2 guards with rifles, or why the guards didn't speak, didn't blink, and never let us out of their sight. The first time I stepped beneath that emerald canopy, I swear I felt something watching us. The air in there was different, thicker, like soup, and filled with the low hum of insects that never got louder or softer, just constant, like white noise that scratched the back of your brain. We were instructed to collect samples: soil, leaves, fruit, anything we found unusual. But no one warned us about the symbols. They weren't drawn, they were carved, deep into the bark of ancient trees, in spirals and jagged angles that pulsed when you looked at them too long. One of them looked like an eye. Another looked like a figure with too many limbs, all reaching downward. When I pointed them out, the guards said nothing. But one of them, the taller one with the scar across his throat, turned and scratched one of the symbols out with the butt of his rifle. His knuckles were white. A week in, people stopped sleeping. Laura claimed she woke up every morning with her sheets soaked in seawater. Darius whispered about dreams where he wasn't himself, like someone else was wearing his skin. Then Kin went missing. We searched for hours, shouting through the trees, circling the base, even breaking into the storage shed where we weren't supposed to go. All we found was a smear of blood on the doorframe and a broken flashlight, still warm. The guards said nothing, just doubled their shifts. But the next day, like nothing happened, Kin walked back into camp. Same jumpsuit, same voice. But something in his eyes was wrong. They didn't blink right. He didn't recognize me at first, even though we'd eaten together every day. When I asked where he'd been, he smiled and said, "I've always been here." That night, I caught him standing outside my window for 40 minutes, not moving. When I opened the door, he was gone. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I went back to the storage shed alone, before the guards were awake, and pried open a drawer marked archival. Inside were folders, hundreds, yellowed with age and labeled in shaky handwriting. I flipped through them, heart pounding, unsure what I was even looking for. And then I saw it. A photo, curled at the edges, black and white. It showed me, standing on the beach in the same gray jumpsuit, staring blankly at the jungle. Only, the date stamped at the bottom was 2 years ago. My mouth went dry. I checked again. The timestamp didn't change. I had never been to this island before. I was sure of it. But there I was, in grainy clarity, looking like I'd forgotten something. Like I'd already done this once before. And just then, behind me, I heard Kin whisper my name. They started checking the security feeds every night. Not because anyone told them to, no orders came down, not officially, but because weird things started showing up on the footage. Glitches that didn't make sense. Moments where the cameras would freeze for several seconds, and when they resumed, someone would be standing a few feet to the left from where they'd been before, motionless, staring off-screen. One night I saw myself in the mess hall, alone, even though I was in bed at the time. I kept watching that loop over and over again, trying to figure out if it was a playback error, a delayed stream, anything I could explain. But then, in the last frame, the version of me on the screen looked directly into the lens and smiled. The kind of smile that didn't belong on my face. After that, most of us stopped watching the footage. But Jackson, the oldest guy in our group, the only one who said he'd worked government contracts before, decided he'd had enough. He found an old Zodiac raft tied up behind the base and took it at dawn, just as the tide was coming in. He said he was heading north, toward open water. The last thing he told me was, "Don't trust the fences. They're not to keep things out." He never came back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the jungle. The way it went completely silent sometimes, like everything inside it was holding its breath. I pulled the blinds on my window, just to calm myself, and that's when I saw them. Two glowing shapes, way out by the tree line. Not eyes. Not exactly. They didn't blink. They didn't move. But they reflected the light from the moon like glass marbles. I stared at them for maybe a full minute before they sank into the darkness like they'd melted into the soil. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't have to. Everyone else looked just as tired, just as pale, just as hunted. In the dining tent, nobody talked anymore. Not about Jackson. Not about the symbols. Just quiet bites of cold food and the occasional sound of something heavy moving across the roof at night. And then yesterday, during routine storage inventory, I found it. A file. Locked in a drawer marked Biological Logs, Phase 3. My hands were sweating when I opened it. Inside were dozens of papers. Test data. Psychological assessments. Sleep monitoring patterns. My name was on 5 of them. Subject: Phase 3, pending escalation. There were timestamps dating back months before I ever arrived. And at the bottom of one page, in bold red ink, it said, "Initiation of active observation, confirmed." And then static. I swear, as I held that file in my hands, I heard something behind the wall. A soft clicking, like teeth tapping glass. We weren't supposed to be that deep in the jungle. The area past the perimeter fence was marked with red stakes, and anything beyond those was considered restricted, not because of any formal warning, but because people whispered about it, the way you whisper about a place that's not quite abandoned. But after what I found in the Phase 3 files, I couldn't stop myself. I needed answers. I needed something real. So I waited until after midnight and followed a barely visible path that seemed more like an animal trail than anything man-made. It led me to a strange hill that hadn't been on any of the base maps, covered in thick vines and half swallowed by tree roots. And buried beneath all of that, half obscured by dirt and time, was a rusted metal panel with a keypad and a barely functioning LED screen. I don't know why I tried my birthday. I hadn't even used that code for anything since college. But when I punched in those numbers, the ground shuddered. The vines peeled away like they'd been waiting. And from the center of the hill, a circular hatch began to sink. A hidden elevator. I don't remember how long it took to reach the bottom. Time got weird down there. The air felt heavier with every foot we dropped, like we were descending into something that didn't want to be disturbed. The doors opened into a hallway lined with flickering emergency lights and metal walls coated in black mildew. My boots echoed like I was the only living thing left in a forgotten tomb. The deeper I went, the worse it got. There were shattered tanks on either side of the corridor, each one large enough to hold a person. Or something like a person. Some still had tubing attached, dripping a dark, congealed fluid that smelled like burnt rubber and salt. Along the walls were empty restraints. Human-sized. Torn. As if whatever they held hadn't broken free, they'd been ripped off. The floor was scratched. Clawed. In the back corner of the final room, past a slumped-over hazmat suit and a long dry trail of blood, I found a research terminal still running on emergency power. Files loaded automatically, blurry photos, tissue scans, progress reports, and one log in particular that made my stomach twist. It was dated August 3rd, 1989, and it was signed by someone still working on our team today. I stared at the signature, hand trembling, then looked back at the tanks, the restraints, the crude drawings of twisted figures pinned to the walls like blueprints of something inhuman. My mind kept racing with questions. Had they made something here? Had they found it? Was it still alive? My flashlight flickered. Something moved in the dark. And then I read the final line of the report, sloppily handwritten in a different ink, as if added long after the original. They've been here longer than they admit. It started with the clocks. First, my wristwatch froze at 3:17 a.m. Then the wall clock in the mess hall spun backward. Not quickly, not dramatically, just a slow, stubborn crawl like time itself was resisting us. I thought it was a power glitch, maybe the humidity messing with the systems, until I realized my food had gone cold before I could even take a bite twice. My boots were dry after wading through the swamp. My bruises healed overnight. I tried to laugh it off, until I looked out my cabin window around midnight and saw symbols glowing in the dirt. Not carved, not burned, glowing. Geometric spirals and jagged intersecting lines, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. I rubbed my eyes and they vanished. The next night, they came back. Stronger. And I could hear them now, whispers carried through the trees like wind through a broken flute. Except the wind was saying my name. Over and over. Then Nolan disappeared. He'd been quiet since the elevator discovery, kept pacing, sketching that same spiral over and over again in the margins of his notebook like he couldn't stop. One night, I heard his door slam. I watched him from my porch, barefoot and glassy-eyed, walking straight into the jungle with nothing but a flashlight. I called out. He didn't even flinch. He just kept walking deeper into the brush until the trees swallowed him whole. I chased after him for what felt like hours, kept seeing flashes of his light just out of reach, but the jungle twisted around me, trees changing position, shadows stretching the wrong direction. Then everything stopped. The jungle blinked. I found myself standing in front of a cave I'd never seen before, half covered in vines and breathing out warm, humid air like something alive. Inside, there were walls covered in more of those symbols, but this time something else was scratched into the stone, something that nearly made me drop my flashlight. It was my own handwriting. Sentences. Fragments. Full thoughts. Things I hadn't said. Things I hadn't thought yet. The island speaks. You won't survive unless you listen. You've been here before. And the worst one, etched deeper than the rest. You never left. I staggered back, but the ground shifted beneath me, and for a second the cave walls flickered, not with light, but with memories. I saw myself, older, thinner, filthy, and barefoot, whispering into the dark. I turned and ran. I don't know how I made it back. The others said I'd been gone for 10 minutes. I swear it was 3 days. My fingernails were caked with dirt. My shirt was torn. And I still had the notebook in my pocket, the one I hadn't brought with me. The one with new pages written in my handwriting that I don't remember writing. Pages that ended with a phrase circled over and over again, pressed so hard the pen tore through. The island is watching. The island is showing us things we can't ignore anymore. And I can't help but wonder if it's letting us see them, or if we're being forced to. Nolan's disappearance still haunts me. The others, they say he's just gone. They don't look for him. They don't even care. But they must know. They must feel something I can't explain, something wrong that keeps pulling me toward these ruins hidden deep in the jungle. It was Emily who found them, half covered in moss and dirt, like the island itself had been trying to bury it. Ancient stones, carved with symbols I've started to recognize. More of those spirals. More of the shapes I keep seeing on the walls of the caves, on the forest floor, glowing. But there was something new this time. Figures. Human figures, etched into the stone, kneeling, reaching out with empty hands. Offering something. The longer I stared, the more the carvings seemed to move, figures bending, shifting, and sacrificing themselves to something beneath the stone. To something alive. I thought I saw Nolan's face among them, but it couldn't have been him. Could it? No one ever leaves the island. I'm starting to believe it. There's something here, something ancient and hungry, tied to the land like the roots of the trees that twist beneath our feet. And it isn't just the carvings. The air smells different here. Thick, like decay, like the earth itself is rotting. The wind whispers through the trees in words I can't quite make out, but the chill that runs down my spine tells me they're not words meant for me. I can feel it now, watching. I've felt it every night since I arrived, but now it's stronger, more pressing. The whispers are louder, insistent. Names, our names, filling my ears, until I can't tell if I'm hearing them from the jungle or from inside my own head. Then, it all clicked. The entity that feeds on memory, the one behind the ruins, behind the whispers, behind everything it takes. And we give. Every time we forget, we give it more. It lives on the things we've lost, the things we've forgotten. This place is feeding on us, on our past, on our memories. It pulls us back, again and again, to replay our lives, to erase who we were, to make us its puppets, forgetting what we had been before. It erases us so it can feed. I'm not the first one to come here. Not by far. I'm not the first one to forget. And what's worse, I don't think I'm the last. Some of us return here willingly, seeking answers, chasing things we shouldn't. The others? They don't even know they've been here before. I don't even know if I've ever really left. I remember now. I remember the first time I was here. And that first time? I didn't want to be. I couldn't sleep that night. Something gnawed at the edges of my mind, something I had known but refused to face. It wasn't until the next morning, in the dim light of the break room, that Adam, a man I'd never spoken to, pulled me aside. I wasn't expecting anything when he whispered my name. I wasn't expecting what came next. "You don't remember, do you?" he asked. His voice trembled, eyes darting around nervously. "You've been here before." He grabbed my arm, his grip too tight. "I've reset dozens of times. Do you think it's a coincidence that none of us can leave? It's the company. They use this island to test consciousness transfer." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless and stunned. The island, it's not real. It's a lab for their experiments. The memories, the resets, all of it. They erase us, send us back to the start. His words didn't just confuse me, they terrified me. I wanted to deny it, to scream that he was insane, but deep down I knew. There was something wrong with the air, with the ground, with everything on this island. The pieces were falling into place, each one colder than the last. "You have to understand," Adam continued, his voice shaking with desperation. "The company controls everything. They don't want us to know the truth. They erase us. If we resist, they replace us. They keep resetting the clock until we forget." He paused, staring into my eyes with a look of absolute fear. "We're not the first group to be here, you know. You've tried to escape before." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had tried. I tried to run, tried to flee this godforsaken place. But something stopped me, or rather, someone. The dark figures I'd seen in the jungle, the whispers that had followed me, the disorienting loops that had dragged me back to the same place. I remembered now, the terrifying realization that no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't escape. They were always there, waiting. And before I knew it, I was back in the same place, the same room, the same island, with no memory of how I'd returned. The worst part? Adam wasn't just telling me what I already suspected. He was telling me something more. Something I couldn't ignore anymore. He had meant to warn me. He was warning me about myself. I had been caught. And it was too late to go back. Adam had warned me that the island would fight back, but I hadn't understood the true meaning of his words until we entered the jungle again. The trees around us seemed to grow denser with every step. The air became thick, suffocating. The paths twisted and turned unpredictably, shifting as if the land itself was alive, pulling us deeper into its heart. Every time we thought we were getting closer to the edge, we found ourselves farther from where we started. The sounds, whispers, low hums, distant voices, seemed to follow us, coaxing us, leading us off track. Every time we stopped to listen, we heard something different. The jungle wasn't just alive, it was aware. It wanted us to get lost. Then the pain started. I felt a dull pressure in my head at first, like a constant ringing in my ears. At first, I tried to ignore it, pushing forward through the dense underbrush, but the farther we went, the worse it got. My vision blurred. The ringing in my ears grew louder, more insistent. I wanted to stop, to hold my head, but the others, Adam, the others, just kept going. We couldn't stop. We couldn't give up. Not now. My ears started bleeding. A slow trickle that I could feel running down my neck, dripping onto the ground. It didn't stop. The pain, the ringing, it felt like I was being torn apart from the inside. Every step felt like it would be my last, but I had no choice but to keep going. It was either push through or die here. Finally, after hours of stumbling through the jungle, we saw it, the beach. A glimmer of hope. The waves crashed gently against the shore. I almost collapsed, my body failing me, but I kept moving forward. The others stumbled behind me, each of us desperate to escape the nightmare that had gripped us. And then, we saw something that made my blood run cold. A boat. A new group of people was arriving, as if they were part of the same twisted cycle we'd found ourselves in. They had no idea what awaited them on this island, no idea that their memories would be erased, that they would be forced to start over just like us. And when they stepped off the boat, I realized the terrifying truth. We were never meant to leave. This place was designed to trap us. All of us. No matter how many times we tried. No matter how many attempts we made. The island won. I never thought I'd make it this far. After all the attempts, after everything that happened, I knew, I was getting out. The boat, the new group, the fresh hope. It was supposed to be the end of it all. But it wasn't. It was just the beginning of something far worse than I could have imagined. You see, the truth is a twisted thing. It's insidious. It doesn't just slip into your mind. It shatters it. And that's what I'm facing now. The moments blur together. I should have known something was off. Why didn't I listen to the whispers in my mind? Those voices calling to me. Voices that seemed so familiar. yet so wrong. As the days passed, I felt the cracks in my sanity widen. But I chose to forget. I had to forget. If I didn't, I wouldn't be able to handle the truth. I wouldn't be able to survive it. The truth is, we never left. We were never meant to leave. The island was never about escape. It was about studying how long it takes before a person breaks, how long before they'll beg for the reset. The project was always a recursive loop, designed to push us further into madness with every cycle. Then it hit me. The final revelation that tore through my mind like a jagged shard of glass. I wasn't the one who had been trying to escape. I was the control subject. I was the one they had been watching all along. The one they had overwritten. The real me was long gone. My mind, my memories, my very essence, all wiped clean, replaced by something else. Something that was never supposed to exist. As I sit here, I realize the horror that surrounds me isn't the jungle. It's not the endless resets. It's the fact that I've always been here. Always. And when they say, "Welcome back, shall we begin again?" It's not a question. It's a command.